Agatha Raisin and Bill Wong's family secret. In the quiet drizzle of Carsely, one secret trembles on the edge of ruin, and Agatha Raisin is about to uncover the truth someone would kill to bury. Step into a world of lies, lineage, and deadly village gossip. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Carsely woke to a fine, persistent drizzle, the sort that settled into your bones and made even the birds sound fed up. Agatha Raisin stood at her cottage door, eyeing the grey sky with the suspicion she usually reserved for door-to-door evangelists. She had promised Mrs. Bloxby she would put in an appearance at Bill Wong's surprise birthday gathering at the WI Hall, and that promise now felt like another example of her softening resolve. She shut the door behind her, stepped over Hodge, who gave her a look of offended ownership, and set off down the lane. Carsely, damp and mud-splattered, was at least lively. Old Mr. Trent was sweeping his path with the fierce energy of someone avenging a personal insult. Two women by the postbox paused their conversation just long enough to give Agatha the once-over. She pretended not to hear the hissed, "That skirt's a bit ambitious at her age." She lit a cigarette, exhaled meaningfully, and walked on. The WI Hall glowed with warm yellow light, a beacon of village well-meaning. Inside, the chatter struck her immediately. People were already in their small clusters, the sort formed by habit, convenience, or long-held grudge. Agatha scanned the room with an air of casual inspection she hoped looked effortless. It never did. Bill Wong stood near the trestle table, swallowed whole by his mother's fussing. Mrs. Wong, who could silence a street just by narrowing her eyes, was plumping his collar, straightening his sleeve, and announcing to anyone within reach, "My Bill never takes care of himself. I told him, I said, if you won't eat properly, you'll end up thin as a lamppost." Bill looked faintly desperate. Agatha felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy for him, followed immediately by annoyance with herself. She made her way over, offering a bright, brittle smile. "Happy birthday, Bill. You look positively harassed." "Thanks, Agatha," he said, grateful for the distraction, though his shoulders remained tense. "Nonsense," Mrs. Wong declared. "He's in the prime of life." Her gaze flicked over Agatha with the cool efficiency of airport security. "You could have dressed more warmly. It's damp." Agatha opened her mouth to retort, but was interrupted by the arrival of a woman she had never seen before. Tall, elegantly poised, wearing a cream suit that wouldn't survive 5 minutes of Carsely mud, she walked straight toward Bill. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, a sound that sliced through the village chatter. "Bill," she said softly, sliding a small wrapped envelope into his hand. "You should look at this later." Agatha watched the exchange with the keen interest of a hawk presented with a suspiciously plump mouse. Bill's face drained of colour. He shoved the envelope into his jacket as though it were radioactive. Mrs. Wong stared at the woman with thin-lipped disapproval, but said nothing. "Who was that?" Agatha asked, voice level but eyes bright. "Just someone I knew ages ago," Bill muttered. "Nothing important." Which, of course, meant it was extremely important. Roy Silver crashed through the door at that moment, drenched in cologne and wearing a jacket that glittered suggestively under the hall lights. "Aggie, darling," he cried, sweeping her into a hug she did not ask for. Villagers turned to stare. She fought the urge to trip him with her foot. Charles Fraith drifted in soon after, wind-blown and smiling. "Thought I'd support local culture," he said cheerfully, kissing Agatha's cheek. "Also, I heard there might be sausage rolls." Agatha felt her temper and insecurities rising in equal measure. Bill was distracted, Roy was shrieking about scones, and Charles was leaning too close while smelling annoyingly good. It was the sort of chaos Agatha normally mastered, but tonight it felt like the village had shifted half an inch to the left without consulting her. The situation worsened when Doris Simpson, in charge of the cake, attempted to lift the sponge from its tin. It slipped, somersaulted, and landed upside down on the tablecloth with a soft, tragic splat. A gasp rippled around the hall. Doris burst into loud apologies. Mrs. Wong muttered, "Standards, honestly." Roy clapped his hands in theatrical sympathy. Charles inspected the damage and pronounced it salvageable, though he was clearly lying. Agatha sighed and stubbed out her cigarette outside the door before returning to the chaos. Bill was slipping away from the crowd. She caught his sleeve. "Where are you going?" "I need some air," he said, voice strained. "Back in a moment." But he didn't come back. The villagers noticed. Their whispers thickened the air. He looked pale. Something's wrong. That woman, who was she? Agatha tried to appear unconcerned. She even helped Doris cut the mangled cake into squares that resembled geological samples. But she kept glancing toward the door. Bill's absence gnawed at her, as did the memory of that cream-suited woman. Charles appeared beside her, offering a plate. "Cake?" "Don't be ridiculous," Agatha snapped. "It looks like a landslide." Charles grinned. "That's half the charm." Roy sailed over, dramatically sniffing the air. "Is it me, or is something terribly amiss with our dear Bill?" He had that haunted look, the sort people get before running off to join a cult. "Don't talk rot," Agatha said, though privately she agreed something was wrong. Bill was steady by nature. Steady people didn't vanish from their own parties. The drizzle had strengthened into rain by the time Agatha finally left the hall. The walk home felt longer than usual. Hodge met her at the door, tail upright with the faint air of someone clocking her late arrival. She bent to stroke him, though her mind was still entangled in images. The cream suit, Bill's pallor, the envelope disappearing into his jacket. She poured herself a generous gin, sat on the sofa, and told herself she would not pry. It was Bill's birthday. He was entitled to odd friendships and mysterious envelopes. She would be mature. She would mind her own affairs. 2 minutes later, she admitted that maturity was overrated. She lit a cigarette, letting the smoke curl toward the low ceiling. "Something's up, Hodge," she muttered, "and I'll find out what." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. She had just decided to make an early night of it when the phone shrilled, loud and insistent. She snatched it up. "Agatha," Bill said. His voice was tight, shaky. "Can you meet me first thing? It's about my family." The line went dead before she could question him. Agatha stared at the receiver, pulse quickening. So much for not prying. The mystery had already invited itself in, dripping rainwater on the mat. The morning staggered into Carsely beneath a pale, watery sun that looked as if it had overslept and couldn't quite apologize for it. Agatha Raisin stood in her kitchen, scowling at the kettle as though it had personally wronged her. She felt that familiar blend of irritation and restless curiosity, always a dangerous combination. Bill's midnight phone call had set her nerves buzzing. Nothing good ever followed the phrase, "It's about my family," particularly in a village where bloodlines were practically competitive sport. She gulped her tea, wrinkled her nose, and reached for a cigarette. Hodge leapt to the counter in outrage, tail lashing. Agatha sighed. All right, I'll smoke outside." She stepped into the cold air, lit up, and inhaled deeply. The village lay still apart from the distant clatter of milk bottles and the hum of a neighbour's radio. There was comfort in that steadiness, but it only made Bill's strained voice more alarming. She snatched her keys and coat, muttered something about people choosing the most inconvenient moments for emotional crises, and set off toward Mercester. The lanes were slick with overnight drizzle. Traffic was light. Only a tractor and a sulking hatchback passed her. By the time she reached Bill's street, her annoyance had ripened into anxious determination. Bill opened the door before she could knock. He looked tired, which irritated her further. "Morning," he said, voice thin. "Morning," she replied. "You sound like someone who's slept inside a vacuum cleaner. What's all this about?" He stepped aside, letting her in. His house was neat in that bachelor police officer way. Clean surfaces, mismatched furniture, and a faint smell of takeaway curry. Agatha perched on the sofa, waiting. Bill produced the envelope. It lay on his palm like an accusation. "This is what that woman gave me last night." "Woman?" Agatha echoed. "You mean the glamorous scarecrow in cream?" "That's unnecessarily rude," Bill said, though without conviction. "Her name's Lorna Bent. We grew up together." Agatha filed the detail with satisfaction. Childhood connections always promise scandal. "Well, open it then. I don't have all day." "I already did." He handed her the contents, a single sheet, neatly typed. The message was short, sharp, and unsettling. "Correct the past," she read aloud, "or the truth about your father will come out." She felt a thrill, followed by guilt for feeling thrilled. "Bill, what is this?" He sat down heavily. "It's about something that happened before I was born. My parents separated briefly." He hesitated. "There was a rumor my mother met someone else." Agatha's eyebrows rose. "Who?" "A man known only as J.H. Mother never talked about him. Dad pretended it never happened. But the village gossips. Well, You know how people are. Agatha certainly did. Gossip was the village's most renewable resource. She leaned forward. So you think this note means your real father might be someone else? Bill winced. I don't know. I've never wanted to know. But someone else clearly does, Agatha said. The letter felt cold in her hand. It was a clue, though she wouldn't admit how much she loved clues. And they think you should correct the past. What does that even mean? Before Bill could answer, a knock sounded at the door. Sharp, precise. Agatha stiffened. Hodge suddenly scratched at the outside step, yowling in irritation. Agatha blinked. He had followed her all the way from Carsely again, the stubborn creature. Bill opened the door to reveal Lorna Bent. She looked even more self-possessed in daylight, which annoyed Agatha on principle. Her hair was neatly swept back, her scarf elegantly knotted. She surveyed Agatha with cool recognition. I assumed you'd be here. Well, your assumptions are improving, Agatha said. Lorna ignored her and stepped inside. Bill, you shouldn't be discussing that letter with anyone. It concerns me, Bill said quietly. And Agatha is an interference, Lorna cut in. Always has been, from what I've heard. Agatha bristled. From what you've heard? How much have you been asking around? I know the village, Lorna said simply. I know what happens when old stories resurface. Bill, you need to leave this alone. Why? Agatha demanded. If there's nothing to hide, why the secrecy? Lorna's eyes flashed. Because some histories don't want correcting. They want burying. It wasn't a threat, not explicitly, but the way she said it, low, controlled, edged with something like fear, made Agatha pause. Lorna turned to Bill. Please, forget the letter. Forget I ever gave it to you. Why give it at all, then? Agatha asked. Lorna hesitated. Because someone else would have, and they wouldn't be kind about it. With that cryptic remark, she moved toward the door. Hodge hissed at her as she passed. Lorna didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. She's hiding something, Agatha said the moment the door shut. Bill rubbed his forehead. Yes, but I don't know what. Well, I intend to find out. Agatha, don't Agatha me. You rang me at midnight. That gives me full investigative rights. He managed a faint smile. That's not how anything works. In Carsely it is, she said briskly. The conversation limped on, circling the same uncertainties. Bill explained fragments of overheard whispers from his youth, vague mentions of arguments between his parents and a single photograph torn neatly in half. His mother had destroyed the other half years ago. It was hardly solid evidence, but it was enough to stir a restless unease in Agatha. By early afternoon, she decided to step out for fresh air and thinking space. Bill needed time. She needed answers. And Hodge needed to stop clawing Bill's carpet. The streets of Mercester were busier now. Children shrieked near the market stalls, a bus wheezed its way up the hill, and a charity collector shook a tin with dismal optimism. Agatha walked, smoking briskly, replaying every word Lorna had spoken. Something about the woman's calm frightened her more than anger would have. At 3:30, as Agatha crossed the square, a police car sped past. Then another. People turned to watch. A murmur rose, quick as wind over grass. What's happened? Agatha asked a nearby florist. Something at the library, the woman replied. Accident, they said. Someone fell down the outside steps. A cold weight settled in Agatha's stomach. She hurried toward the library, pushing through the cluster of onlookers. Police tape stretched across the alleyway. Officers moved briskly, their faces grim. A stretcher lay on the ground, covered with a sheet. Bill stood to the side, pale as paper. Agatha reached him, breath shallow. Who is it? He swallowed. His voice cracked. Lorna Bent. Agatha stared at the sheet, then at Bill. The damp air thickened, pressing on her chest. Lorna Bent, cool, secretive and frightened, was now the centre of a different kind of silence. A constable approached. D.S. Wong, you were seen speaking with the deceased earlier today. We'll need a statement. Agatha stepped between them. He hasn't done anything. We still need a statement, the constable repeated. Bill nodded numbly. It's all right, Agatha. But it wasn't, not remotely. And Agatha could already hear the village gossip machine grinding into motion, naming the most obvious suspect. She glanced once more at the stretcher. A bitter thought settled in her mind. Secrets rarely stayed buried in the Cotswolds, but murder had a way of unearthing them faster than anything else. Back in Carsely, the mood in the Red Lion was feverish. News had spread faster than the smell of fried chips. Villagers huddled in small clusters, whispering furiously. The fire crackled with smug warmth, as though enjoying the drama. Agatha entered with the unmistakable air of someone ready to interrogate an entire room. She ordered a gin, downed half of it in one go, and set about gathering information. Doris Simpson was the first target. She was perched by the window, hunched over a crossword with the intense concentration of a hawk solving advanced mathematics. Agatha slid into the seat opposite her. "Terrible business," Doris said before Agatha could speak. "Dead as anything, poor girl." "You knew her?" Agatha asked. "Not well. She used to come by the post office sometimes, always asking after local families, lineage, dates, who married whom. I told her if she wanted proper scandal, she should ask Mrs. Mason, but she said she needed verified sources." Doris sniffed. "Young people these days rely too much on facts." Agatha leaned in. "Did she say why she wanted all that?" "Something about a personal project. Could be genealogical nonsense. Could be she was writing a book. Hard to say with those clever types." Doris lowered her voice. "Of course, I did see her arguing with that genealogist fellow, Henry Fenn, yesterday." Agatha's pulse sharpened. "Arguing?" "Oh, yes. Right outside the hardware shop. She was waving papers at him. He looked like a man told his dog preferred another owner." A clue, a solid one. Agatha almost smiled. She finished her gin, muttered thanks, and moved on to eavesdrop near the hearth where two elderly men debated whether Lorna had enemies. Their theories ranged from jealous lovers to disgruntled historians. One insisted the steps were cursed. Agatha filed it all away, though the cursed steps theory she mentally shredded as rubbish. After a solid hour of collecting gossip, Agatha stepped outside for air and a cigarette. The rain had eased into a misty drizzle. She lit up, inhaled, and let her thoughts settle. Lorna Bent had been digging into family histories. She had given Bill a threatening letter. She had warned him to avoid the past. And now she was dead. Someone had reason to silence her. Agatha tapped ash onto the pavement, feeling the stirrings of excitement she knew she shouldn't savour. She told herself she was only trying to help Bill, which was partly true, but she also felt the old familiar hunger, the puzzle, the chase, the chance to prove she was more than a middle-aged woman villagers underestimated. When she returned home, Hodge greeted her with such disdain it bordered on theatrical. He stalked past her to his food bowl, pausing only to glare. "Bad day," Agatha muttered, refilling his dish. "Don't give me attitude." She slumped onto the sofa, shoes kicked off, hair damp. The quiet of the cottage pressed close, too close. She poured herself another gin, took a long sip, and tried to shake off the image of Bill being led away. The doorbell made her jump. She glanced at the clock. Too late for neighbours, too early for Roy, who preferred dramatic entrances after 9. She opened the door. No one stood there. Only an envelope lay on the mat. Plain, white, dampened slightly by the mist. Her stomach tightened. She picked it up, carried it inside, and opened it with a swift, impatient tear. One sentence sat in the centre of the page, typed neatly like the letter Bill had received. "Stop digging into Wong blood, or someone else will fall." Agatha stared at the words, a cold shiver working its way down her spine. Someone was watching. Someone knew she'd been prying. Someone wanted her silent. Hodge jumped onto the arm of the sofa, tail curling around him. Agatha stroked him absently, eyes still on the letter. "Well," she said softly, "they picked the wrong woman to threaten." Hodge blinked slowly, unimpressed. Agatha leaned back, cigarette trembling slightly between her fingers. She felt the creeping mixture of fear and exhilaration that always came before a case grew darker. A woman was dead, Bill was under suspicion, and someone clearly thought the past should stay buried. Agatha Raisin, however, had never been good at leaving things buried. She lit another cigarette, trying not to dwell on the feeling of unseen eyes in the darkness beyond her window. The drizzle thickened again, tapping faintly against the glass. "Let them try," she muttered. "I've dealt with worse bullies." Hodge stretched luxuriously beside her, unconvinced. Still, even in the dimness, Agatha felt the weight of the warning settle in her chest. Someone in the Cotswolds wanted bloodlines kept quiet. Someone feared the truth. and she had just painted a bright red target on her back. Evesham looked washed out under a thin veil of morning drizzle, its shop fronts dulled and pavements slick. Agatha marched along the high street with the purposeful stride of a woman who had abandoned patience somewhere back in Carsely. Her cigarette glowed defiantly in the damp air. She reached the narrow stairway leading to Henry Fenn's office. Fenn and Family Lineages, Esther 1964. The brass plaque announced with more dignity than the peeling paint deserved. She pushed the door open without knocking. Henry Fenn looked up from a cluttered desk, annoyance instantly clouding his thin, solemn face. He was tall and narrow, like a man who had been stretched as a warning to others. His tie was crooked, and his spectacles perched at an awkward angle, giving him the air of someone who believed himself intellectually superior to most of the planet. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, as though she were mildew, "this is a private office." "So is my cottage, but people keep turning up at all hours," Agatha replied, settling into the chair opposite him with brisk entitlement. "I'm here about Lorna Bent." His fingers tightened on a fountain pen. "I've already spoken to the police." "Yes, well, they don't always ask the right questions, I do." He sniffed. "I can't discuss client matters." "Lorna's no longer your client, given she's fallen down a set of steps." Henry flinched at that. Agatha filed it away. "She hired you to investigate a family line," Agatha pressed. "Which one?" "Confidential." "You argued with her yesterday," Agatha said. "You do know people saw you." His jaw clenched. "Lorna accused me of withholding certain records. A ridiculous idea. I'm a respected genealogist." "Respected by whom?" Agatha asked sweetly. He ignored the jab. "She believed I was hiding names that were inconvenient to her project. She had a regrettable temper." "If her temper was anything like mine, you should count yourself lucky you're alive," Agatha said dryly. Henry bristled. "I did nothing wrong." "So what was she looking for?" Agatha asked. "And don't say confidential again or I'll scream." He folded his arms. "She wanted information on one particular bloodline. She refused to say why. When I couldn't produce records she wanted, she accused me of sabotage." "Sabotage! As if I have time to ruin the work of meddling amateurs." Agatha watched him rant, noting the flicker of insecurity beneath the bluster. Then came the red herring. Henry launched into a lengthy tirade about rival genealogists who were jealous of his precision, how one had stolen his research notes in 1989, and how another had forged census entries to discredit him. Agatha nodded along, pretending sympathy, while quietly observing every detail in the hopelessly cluttered room. Piles of parish binders, scattered index cards, and a half-open briefcase on the floor leaking papers like an overfed filing cabinet. As Henry bent to pick up a fallen ledger, a small card slipped from the desk and fluttered toward Agatha's shoe. She casually lowered her handbag, covering the card. When Henry turned back, she scooped it up and slid it neatly inside her pocket. She'd glimpsed the name as it fell. J. Hallenby, Cirencester. Promising. Henry continued, oblivious. "I told Lorna she had no right to accuse me. My methods are meticulous, my records are impeccable." "Except the ones you can't find," Agatha murmured. Henry glared. "If you're suggesting I had anything to do with her fall, you're wasting your time. I was here all afternoon. 3 clients can confirm that." "Good to know you've rehearsed your alibi," Agatha said, rising. He spluttered. "I don't need an alibi." "Everyone does when someone dies in the Cotswolds," she said, heading for the door. "We have standards." Outside, the drizzle had intensified, falling in fine diagonal streaks. Agatha lit another cigarette, savouring the comforting burn. The card in her pocket felt like a prize. She didn't yet know who J. Hallenby was, but Cirencester was only a short drive away, and she had nothing but questions and stubbornness to fill the day. She crossed back to her car, but stopped when she spotted Charles Fraith leaning against a lamppost, umbrella hooked over his shoulder, looking like an advertisement for casual aristocratic idleness. "You've been spying," Agatha accused. "I was waiting," Charles said easily. "Spying requires effort." He straightened. "Lunch? You need feeding before you interrogate another terrified man." "I don't terrify people," Agatha grumbled. Charles laughed. "You terrify me regularly." They walked to a small tea room, its windows fogged from baking and gossip. Agatha ordered a sandwich and tea. Charles ordered something with too many adjectives. He studied her with infuriating amusement. "You look riled," he observed. "I am not riled," Agatha said, though she was. "Henry Fenn is hiding something. Most genealogists are. Comes with digging up unwanted ancestors." Charles took a sip of his overcomplicated beverage. "I saw Lorna not long ago, at that ghastly village fete near the vicarage. She was asking people about old romances, who courted whom, who vanished and who returned." Agatha perked up. "Old romances?" "Yes. She cornered Mrs. Mason for 20 minutes about some business from the 70s. Mrs. Mason nearly fainted from the excitement." Agatha frowned. She said she was doing a personal project. Ah, the irresistible phrase that covers everything from memoirs to nervous breakdowns. Agatha tapped her fingers against the table. "She warned Bill about correcting the past. She also gave him that letter." "Which makes her either helpful or manipulative," Charles said. "Possibly both. People often are." Agatha glared at him. "You're being philosophical." "I try not to be. It causes wrinkles." She rolled her eyes, but felt a small stab of jealousy when Charles casually mentioned bumping into an old friend at the fete. "Old friend?" she asked, voice cool. "Caroline Farnham. Lovely woman. Married now. 3 children. Agatha sniffed. "Probably exhausted and frumpy." "Actually, she looked rather well," Charles said thoughtfully. Agatha's jaw tightened. Charles smiled with shameless mischief. Her irritation, combined with worry for Bill, created a familiar internal storm. She hated how transparent her feelings could be around Charles, and how much he enjoyed noticing them. She stabbed her sandwich with unnecessary force. "Be careful, Agatha," Charles said after a pause. "Someone is clearly bothered by Lorna's digging, and by yours." "I'm not frightened," Agatha lied. "I know," Charles replied lightly. "That's the worrying part." After lunch they parted ways. Agatha drove back to Carsely, headlights glinting off wet hedgerows. Her mind spun through possibilities. Lorna's arguments with Henry, her obsession with family lines, and that mysterious J. Hallenby. Every thread pointed toward old secrets, the sort villages carried with surprising ferocity. By the time she reached her cottage, the sky had darkened into a moody slate color. Hodge sat in the window, tail curled like a judgmental question mark. Agatha unlocked the door, and Hodge sauntered over, demanding food and mild reverence. She had barely removed her coat when a soft knock sounded. Mrs. Bloxby stood on the doorstep, umbrella dripping politely, expression unusually grave. "Agatha, may I come in?" she asked. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Mrs. Bloxby stepped inside, shaking off raindrops. She held her handbag close, as though steadying herself. "I need to speak to you about Lorna Bent." Agatha's pulse quickened. "What about her?" Mrs. Bloxby sat on the sofa, folding her hands. Her usual serenity was tempered by something like sadness. "I knew her when she was a child. Her family lived near the vicarage for several years. She was bright and curious, always asking about local history. But there was something else." Agatha leaned in. "Go on." "Lorna once told me she believed a man had vanished from the village shortly after Bill was born. She heard it whispered among adults and became fascinated by it. She talked about it as though it were a mystery waiting to be solved." Agatha felt a cold ripple along her spine. "A vanished man?" Mrs. Bloxby nodded. "She said the disappearance was connected to someone she cared about. She never explained more, but she seemed determined to understand it." Agatha exhaled slowly. "So she kept digging?" "Yes," Mrs. Bloxby said softly. "And now she is gone." The cottage fell quiet. Hodge stretched, unconcerned, then curled against Agatha's leg. She stroked him absently, thoughts churning. A vanished man, a hidden bloodline, a genealogist with secrets, and someone willing to kill to keep them buried. Agatha looked toward the rain-streaked window, her jaw tightening with resolve she pretended was annoyance. "Well," she said, "if they thought Lorna Bent was persistent, they have no idea what's coming." Hodge purred in faint agreement, though Agatha suspected he simply wanted dinner. The morning sky sagged under a heavy blanket of grey, the sort of weather that encouraged gloom and discouraged sensible hairstyles. Agatha Raisin drove toward Cirencester with a cigarette in one hand and her irritation firmly in the other. The card she'd pocketed from Henry Fenn's office felt like a lodestone in her handbag. J. Hallenby, solicitor. She repeated the name under her breath as if testing its moral weight. It sounded respectable enough, but so did half the villains she'd encountered over the years. The traffic was light. A few determined lorries grumbled along the A-road, and a lone cyclist pedalled furiously against the wind as though escaping personal demons. Agatha admired the dedication, but still muttered, "Idiot," as she overtook him. She reached Cirencester's old stone centre just as the drizzle shifted to a listless rain, dampening shoppers and pigeons with equal indifference. Hallamby's office hid above an estate agency, accessed by a creaking staircase that smelled faintly of onions and dust. Agatha knocked once before pushing the door open. Inside, she found a narrow room lined with filing cabinets that looked older than the man himself. J. Hallamby sat behind a desk stacked with precarious piles of legal papers. He was elderly, nearly skeletal, with thinning silver hair and spectacles perched on his nose like an afterthought. He peered at her. "Can I help you?" "Agatha Raisin," she announced. "I'm here about Lorna Bent." His expression tightened at once, a visible recoil. "Dear me, not again." Agatha took a seat. "You knew her?" "I knew of her. She contacted me several weeks ago. Wanted to discuss an old matter I handled decades ago. Very odd girl." "What matter?" He hesitated long enough for Agatha to narrow her eyes. Hallamby sighed, resigned. "A man named John Harford. He disappeared 28 years ago." Agatha's heart ticked faster. "Disappeared?" "Left the area abruptly," Hallamby said, adjusting his spectacles. "Perhaps not formally a disappearance, but sudden enough to raise eyebrows at the time." He paused. "Miss Bent wanted details. I declined. The case was sensitive." "Sensitive how?" He lifted a folder from the pile, its edges worn. "Harford was involved in some local unpleasantness. Nothing criminal, you understand, just complications. He had been friendly with a married woman." Agatha sat up straighter. "Which woman?" "That is not my place to reveal." "Was it Bill Wong's mother?" Agatha demanded. Hallamby's lips pressed into a thin line. Miss Bent asked the same question. Agatha felt a surge of triumph, dampened only slightly by dread. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. I do not discuss private cases." But she kept pressing. "Repeatedly," he said. She seemed convinced Harford's sudden departure related to that friendship. She believed someone warned him to leave. Agatha leaned closer. "Who warned him?" Hallamby's eyes flickered. "I did not say I knew." "You paused," Agatha countered, "and people who pause are nearly always guilty of knowing something." Hallamby looked deeply offended. "I am an officer of the law." "That doesn't make you innocent," Agatha said, "or helpful." He fidgeted with the folder. Harford was a quiet man, soft-spoken. He lodged near the High Street, vanished within days of a rather heated argument overheard by neighbours. "With whom?" "Heated arguments were hardly unusual at the time," Hallamby said stiffly. "I cannot identify the speaker." Agatha's frustration climbed. "Did he leave any forwarding address?" "None," Hallamby replied. "He simply left. The matter faded. People forget quickly in Cirencester." "Not in Carsely," Agatha muttered. She tried again. Lorna thought Harford's departure was forced. "She suggested as much," Hallamby admitted. "She was rather intense. I thought her pursuing ghosts." Agatha stood. "Well, her ghost has a body now. She's dead." The solicitor paled. "I saw that in the paper. Shocking." "People die when others lie," Agatha said sharply. "And somebody's lying about Harford." Hallamby looked away, eyes misting with age rather than emotion. "I told Miss Bent what I'm telling you. Harford left because he chose to. That is all." Agatha didn't believe him. She thanked him curtly and left before she said something truly unwise. Outside, the cold air slapped her cheeks. She lit a cigarette and inhaled with an irritation bordering on comfort. Harford had known Bill's mother. Harford had left suddenly. And someone, Henry, Hallamby, or another shadow, had pushed Lorna too close to the truth. Agatha drove back to Carsely with her thoughts in a tight snarl. She reached the village mid-afternoon. The drizzle had thinned, replaced by the gentle clank of milk bottles and the faint sound of children playing near the vicarage. Her cottage looked reassuringly solid. Smoke curled lazily from nearby chimneys. She stepped inside and nearly tripped over Roy Silver. Roy sat on her kitchen stool, scarf draped theatrically around his neck, kettle steaming on the hob. He munched on her chocolate biscuits with the guilt of a cat in a creamery. "Roy!" Agatha barked. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing emotional support," he said, mouth full. "Also, these biscuits are divine. Where did you get them?" "Supermarket," she snapped. "Why are you in my house?" "I have news," Roy announced dramatically. "Well, not news exactly, but instinct. A feeling. A vibe." "You don't have vibes." Roy placed a hand on his chest. "Aggie, I have exquisite vibes." She snatched the biscuit tin away. "Spit it out." Roy's eyes gleamed. "What if Bill doesn't want the truth known?" Agatha froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Roy said, lingering on the suspense like a bad actor, "what if Bill knows more than he's saying? What if he's protecting someone, or himself?" "Bill wouldn't hurt Lorna," Agatha snapped. "I didn't say he did. I'm just saying people hide things, especially family things." Agatha glared. "Get out." "But I—" "Out." Roy flinched at her tone and stood. "Fine. But don't shoot the messenger. I'm only trying to help." "Then stay silent," Agatha said. "That would help tremendously." He huffed, wrapped his scarf around himself like a wounded prince, and swept out of the cottage. Agatha slammed the door with satisfying force, but his words lingered like smoke. What if Bill didn't want the truth known? What if Lorna had threatened something deeper? The doubts gnawed cruelly at Agatha. She poured herself a strong gin and sank onto the sofa, Hodge climbing up beside her with a soft meow. She stroked him absently, mind restless and uneasy. Dusk settled early. The cottage darkened, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp and the flicker of rain against the window. Agatha considered phoning Bill but didn't. She hated this feeling, this uncertainty lodged painfully between loyalty and suspicion. Hours slipped by. She stood finally to lock the door, though Carsely rarely required such vigilance. Hodge followed her, tail twitching. She had just turned the key when a faint noise scraped against the outside wall. A quiet, deliberate rustling, unlike wind or branches. Hodge's fur bristled instantly. He growled, a deep, furious sound Agatha had never heard from him. He leapt to the windowsill, tail puffed, eyes blazing into the darkness. Agatha's heart thudded. Someone was outside. She moved cautiously to the window, but saw nothing except the vague outline of hedgerows. The scraping sound came again, this time near the back door. Hodge hissed so fiercely he toppled a vase. Agatha grabbed a fire poker, slightly rusty but satisfying in weight, and crept toward the back door. The handle rattled, not violently, but with clear intent. "Who's there?" she barked. Silence. Then footsteps, quick, retreating, followed by the sound of someone vaulting over the low garden wall. Agatha flung open the back door in time to see only rain and the faint blur of movement disappearing into night. She stepped outside, breath sharp in the cold. On the ground near the door lay another envelope, plain, white, unmarked, and empty. Hodge nudged it with a suspicious paw. Agatha stared at it, heartbeat hammering. First a threat, now a break-in attempt. Someone wanted to silence her or intimidate her enough to back off. She straightened, anger stiffening her spine. "Well," she said aloud, "they'll have to do better than that." But when she shut the door, hand trembling slightly, she admitted, only to herself, that the empty envelope felt more dangerous than any threat could. Hodge curled at her feet, purring protectively. Agatha bent to stroke him, letting his warmth settle her mind. The cottage hummed softly around them, cozy and fragile. "We're in trouble, Hodge," she murmured. "Proper trouble." Hodge blinked solemnly, as if agreeing that trouble was an old friend of Agatha's. And outside, unseen in the dark, someone watched her window until the lamp finally went out. The next morning crept over Carsely in a watery haze, as though the sun had lost interest halfway through rising. Agatha stood at her cottage window, cigarette in hand, watching mist cling stubbornly to the hedgerows. Hodge sat on the table beside her, tail curled neatly around his paws, offering silent judgment on her fifth cigarette before 9. She ignored him. She had bigger problems. Bill had been suspended. Suspended. The word clanged in her mind like a dropped saucepan. She grabbed her coat and marched toward Mercester with the grim focus of a woman who intended to rearrange someone's life by lunchtime. The drizzle thickened as she drove, streaking along the windscreen in faint silver trails. By the time she reached Bill's small terraced house, her pulse had settled into a rhythm of irritation and dread. He answered the door looking older than he had the right to. His eyes were shadowed, his hair rumpled. He stepped aside silently, allowing her in. The house felt smaller today, dim, cramped, thick with unspoken worry. "You should be at work," she said. "I've been suspended," he replied. "Standard procedure during an investigation." "Standard rubbish," she snapped. "You didn't push Lorna, so why treat you like a criminal?" Bill sank onto the sofa. "Because I was involved with her." "Not involved," Agatha said quickly, heart stuttering. "Surely not." "No," he said, almost amused by her horror. "She was my friend, but we argued lately, and she phoned me the day she died. That's enough to raise eyebrows." Agatha sat beside him. "Tell me everything." For a moment he didn't speak. Then something cracked. Small, but significant. "Lorna was asking about John Harford," he said quietly. "She rang me weeks ago, told me she'd discovered something about him." Agatha blinked. "You knew she was investigating Harford?" "Yes," he admitted. "I didn't tell you because it sounded silly then. She said someone in the village didn't want her digging, said it was dangerous." Agatha stiffened. She was right. Bill rubbed his eyes. She believed someone warned Harford to leave. She thought it connected to me somehow, to my father. His voice wavered slightly. "She was afraid of telling me more. I thought she was imagining things." "She wasn't," Agatha said. "And someone wants you to believe she was." Bill stared at the carpet. "I was afraid she'd discover something awful, that I was born from something Mother told Dad about only years later. They separated briefly. She met someone." Agatha felt an unexpected tug of sympathy. Bill rarely let vulnerability show. "Even if Harford was your father," she said carefully, "it doesn't make you responsible for anything." "No," Bill said. "But someone thinks I should leave it alone." Agatha lifted her chin. "And that's exactly why we won't." He gave her a small, exasperated smile. "We?" "Yes." "We?" Agatha snapped. "I've invested too many cigarettes in this already." The faintest laugh escaped him, but the relief was short-lived. "There's something else, but he said. "Henry Fenn visited my mother yesterday." Agatha's eyebrows shot up. "Henry Fenn? The genealogist with the ego problem?" "Mother said he asked questions about Harford. She told him nothing." "Your mother never tells anyone anything," Agatha muttered. "She guards her privacy like a dragon." Bill shook his head. "She was shaken. Properly shaken. I've never seen her like that." Agatha felt her pulse quicken. Mrs. Wong was not the type to be rattled by thin, twitchy genealogists. Something was wrong. "I'm going to Carsely," Agatha announced, standing. "I'll speak to her myself." Bill looked alarmed. "Agatha, please." "Someone is tormenting your family," she said fiercely. "I'm not sitting on my hands." He sighed. "Just be careful." "Always," she lied, grabbing her coat. Carsely lay under a blanket of soft drizzle, a damp hush over its honeystone cottages. Agatha found Mrs. Wong at the vicarage gate, umbrella poised like a shield. Her stiff posture reminded Agatha of a queen guarding an empire. "Mrs. Wong," Agatha called. The older woman turned, face composed into polite frost. "Mrs. Raisin, Bill told me you might come." "I need to ask you something," Agatha said. "About Harford." A flicker, barely perceptible, crossed Mrs. Wong's expression. "I do not wish to discuss that." "But it's important," Agatha insisted. Lorna was asking questions about him. Mrs. Wong's jaw tightened. Lorna Bent was a clever girl. Too clever. "She's dead," Agatha said quietly. Mrs. Wong closed her eyes briefly. "I know." "Did you know Harford?" Agatha pressed. Mrs. Wong hesitated. Then, "Yes, briefly, during my separation. He was kind, but he left of his own accord. That is all." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Are you sure?" Mrs. Wong met her gaze. "There are things better left forgotten." "Not when someone's dead," Agatha said. "Not when Bill is being blamed." Mrs. Wong's composure cracked slightly. "I wanted to protect him. That's all I've ever wanted." "Then help me," Agatha urged. "Tell me the truth." Mrs. Wong shook her head. "The truth is not always protection." She turned abruptly and walked toward her cottage, leaving Agatha standing in the drizzle with more questions than answers. "Brilliant," Agatha muttered. "Another evasive parent. Just what this village needed." Mrs. Bloxby found her minutes later, standing beneath the dripping branches outside the vicarage. "Agatha," she said gently, "you look troubled." "I look soaked," Agatha replied, "and Mrs. Wong is hiding something." Mrs. Bloxby's expression softened. She carries pride like armour, but pride can be a heavy burden. "She admitted she knew Harford," Agatha said, "but I could tell she wasn't telling me everything." "Sometimes silence isn't malice," Mrs. Bloxby said softly. "Sometimes it's shame, or fear of hurting someone." Agatha stared at her. "You always make me feel like a bulldozer." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "A very determined bulldozer." They walked together toward the village centre. The Red Lion pub door swung open, releasing a wave of chatter and the comforting scent of chips. Before they could pass, Doris Simpson bustled out, clutching a shopping bag and wearing the triumphant expression of someone who had discovered irresistible gossip. "Agatha!" Doris exclaimed. "You'll never believe this. I've solved the murder." Mrs. Bloxby looked faintly alarmed. Agatha inhaled with dread. "Go on." "It's one of them city types," Doris declared. "Always is. They come in wearing fancy clothes, then next thing you know, someone's dead." "Lorna grew up here," Agatha pointed out. "Exactly, and she went away to the city. That changes a person, makes them capable of anything." Agatha pinched the bridge of her nose. "Doris, and fingerprints can be read by psychics now," Doris continued confidently. "My sister said so. They can feel the murderer's aura." Agatha nearly choked. "Psychics don't read fingerprints." "Shows what you know," Doris replied, head shaking mournfully. Mrs. Bloxby whispered, "Perhaps best to let her finish." But Doris was already launching into a theory involving a vengeful librarian, a cursed book, and a jealous ghost. Agatha walked away mid-sentence. Mrs. Bloxby murmured a polite farewell and followed. "This village is going to be the death of me," Agatha muttered. "Not if I can help it," Mrs. Bloxby said warmly. They reached Agatha's cottage. Hodge waited at the window, tail flicking with impatience. As Agatha opened the door, he trotted out, brushing against her legs with more affection than usual. She bent to stroke him. "You're a good boy," she murmured. Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "He knows you're worried." Agatha sighed. "I am worried. Everything feels tangled. Bill's mother is hiding something. Henry Fenn is sniffing around. And whoever broke into my cottage last night wanted to scare me." "Then you must tread gently," Mrs. Bloxby said. Agatha didn't reply. She ushered her friend inside for tea. The kettle hissed comfortingly. They spoke for a while, small things, gentle things, until Mrs. Bloxby had to leave for parish duties. When she left, the cottage fell into its familiar quiet. Agatha washed the mugs, dried them, then sat at the table, fingers tapping restless rhythms. She glanced at the clock. 3:22. Too early for gin, too late for patience. The phone rang. She jumped. It rang again. Slow, deliberate. Agatha lifted the receiver. "Yes?" The voice on the other end was calm, male, and utterly unknown. "Mrs. Raisin." Agatha's breath tightened. "Who is this?" "You're digging where you shouldn't." Her grip tightened. "Coward, I'm not frightened of you." "Leave the Harford line alone," the voice said softly. "You don't want to know what comes next." The line clicked dead. Agatha stared at the receiver, heart pounding. Hodge leapt onto the table, pressing against her arm with uncharacteristic protectiveness. She stroked his fur, steadying herself. "Well," she whispered, "that's done it. Now I'm definitely not stopping." But as she put the receiver down, her hand trembled slightly, just enough to remind her that bravery and fear often lived uncomfortably side by side. Cirencester looked weary under the flat pewter sky as Agatha marched toward Hallenby's office with her coat collar up and her mood several degrees colder than the air. Yesterday's warning on the phone still clung to her nerves. She refused to let fear win, but she was getting tired of being stalked by anonymous envelopes and mysterious men with threatening voices. A murder was one thing. A campaign of intimidation was quite another. The staircase to Hallenby's office creaked louder than usual, as though protesting her return. She knocked once, pushed open the door, and froze. The room looked as if a storm had spun through it. Papers littered the carpet in chaotic piles. Drawers hung open like gasping mouths. One small patch of carpet near the far filing cabinet was charred, the faint scent of burnt paper clinging to the stale air. "What in God's name?" Agatha whispered. Hallenby appeared from behind an overturned chair, straightening slowly like an elderly heron. His face was pale, his glasses askew, and his hands trembled faintly. "Mrs. Raisin," he croaked, "this is hardly a good time." Agatha stepped further in. "What happened?" "A break-in," he said. "Someone forced the door during the night." "Have you called the police?" "I have," Hallenby snapped. "They said they will send someone when available, which means sometime between now and the next century." He gestured helplessly at the chaos. "My files, ruined." Agatha scanned the room with quick, sharp eyes. Documents torn, scattered, shoved aside, but not aimlessly. Whoever had done this had searched with purpose, a targeted frenzy, not vandalism. "What did they take?" she asked. Hallenby pulled at his tie. "Nothing significant." Agatha lifted an eyebrow. "You're a terrible liar." He blinked indignantly. "I beg your pardon?" She pointed toward the filing cabinets. "That drawer there, bottom left, is missing a folder. The dust line gives it away. What was kept there?" Hallenby stiffened. "Merely correspondence from old clients." "Which client?" Agatha pressed. He hesitated, only for a heartbeat, but long enough for Agatha to feel triumphant. "John Harford," he admitted reluctantly. "Personal correspondence from years ago. Nothing sensational." Agatha stared him down. "Someone burned part of your carpet to destroy something, and they stole Harford's folder. Don't insult me by pretending it's trivial." Hallenby sank onto a chair. "I didn't want further trouble. Lorna Bent was persistent, too persistent, and look what happened to her." Agatha felt her jaw tighten. What exactly was in that folder? Hallenby rubbed his forehead. "Letters, notes regarding his tenancy, a few personal pages I barely remember." "You remember everything," Agatha said. "Everyone says so." "I remember what matters," he replied quietly. She narrowed her eyes. "You're afraid." "Of course I'm afraid," he burst out. "Miss Bent died miserably, chasing ghosts. Now someone has broken into my office and stolen files I haven't touched in decades. If you had any sense, you would step back." Agatha leaned forward. "If I had any sense, I wouldn't be involved at all. Unfortunately, I'm me." She left him there among the debris, feeling both satisfaction and dread. The missing folder confirmed Harford hadn't simply vanished of his own accord. Someone wanted all traces of him erased. Outside, the air sharpened with cold. Agatha lit a cigarette. She barely took 2 drags before a familiar voice screeched down the street. "Aggie! Aggie, darling! There you are!" Roy Silver barreled toward her, scarf flying behind him like a frantic flag. His cheeks were flushed with excitement, and he clutched a small notebook dramatically. "Roy, if you've come for biscuits, I'm not supplying you," Agatha warned. "Biscuits are the least of it," Roy said breathlessly. "I bring breaking London insight." Agatha groaned. "I don't trust your London insight. It usually has sequins." Roy ignored her. "I found a journalist, a real one. Investigated a disappearance, a decade ago. Similar circumstances." "Similar how?" Agatha asked, cigarette poised. "Man vanished," Roy said. "Family scandal. Whispered rumours about someone being driven out. And," he paused for effect, "a warning letter, just like Bill's." Agatha felt her pulse thrum. A pattern. Yes. Roy flung his arms wide. "A chain of tragic history, a saga of—" "Stop," Agatha cut in. "Use normal words." Roy sighed dramatically. "Fine. The journalist said these cases always came back to family shame and village pressure. Someone trying to erase embarrassment." Agatha considered this. "And now someone's repeating their handiwork." Roy brightened. "See? You do trust me." "I trust you about as far as I can throw you," Agatha said, "which isn't far, because you moisturize too much." Roy placed a hand over his heart. "Cruel." Agatha sighed. "Come on, I need a lift back to Carsely." "I'm not a taxi," Roy protested. "You are today." Roy dropped her at the village green, muttering about the disrespect of friends. Agatha strode toward her cottage, but a sleek vintage convertible purred to a stop beside her before she reached the gate. Charles Fraith leaned out, looking insufferably pleased with himself. "Fancy a lift, Agatha?" "I'm already home," she said. "Walk inside, then walk back out again. I'll feel useful." Agatha scowled, but climbed into the passenger seat. Charles drove slowly through Carsely, as though the village appreciated being viewed from his car. "You've been meddling again," he said lightly. "Investigating," Agatha corrected. "You make it sound respectable," Charles teased, but I admire your tenacity. Ferocious, even. You say that like it's a flaw. No, he said, like it's impressive. Terrifying, but impressive. Agatha blinked. Genuine compliments from Charles were rare, usually arriving wrapped in sarcasm. She cleared her throat. I went to Hallamby's office. Someone ransacked it and stole Harford's file. Charles whistled low. Brave of them, or foolish. Both, Agatha muttered. Roy thinks this is all about family shame. Isn't everything, Charles said. People will kill to protect a reputation. Agatha didn't disagree. Someone warned me to leave it alone. Someone broke into my cottage. Someone stole documents. Whoever they are, they're escalating. Charles gave her a sideways glance. Agatha, you should be careful. Everyone keeps saying that, she said. It's getting dull. It's meant sincerely, Charles replied. Well, mostly. They reached her cottage. Charles hopped out and opened her door with mock gallantry. Your kingdom, madam. Agatha rolled her eyes. You're ridiculous. Yes, he agreed cheerfully, but charming. She went inside, still smiling, though the smile faded quickly. The cottage was quiet, warm and comforting in a way that made the outside world seem far more dangerous. Hodge greeted her with a flick of the tail, then returned to the cosy nest he'd made from her scarf. Agatha filled the kettle, watching the steam rise. She felt the weight of the missing Harford file, the warning on her phone, and the sense that she was circling closer to something important and potentially catastrophic. A knock sounded at the door. She tensed until she heard the soft, familiar voice. Agatha, it's only me. Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha opened the door quickly. Mrs. Bloxby stepped inside, carrying a small cloth-wrapped parcel. Her expression was serious, more serious than usual. I found something, she said softly. Agatha's pulse leapt. What is it? Mrs. Bloxby untied the cloth and revealed an old parish record book, the leather cracked and the edges frayed. She opened it with reverence. Inside, tucked carefully between pages, was a folded sheet of yellowed paper. We were sorting through older parish boxes, Mrs. Bloxby explained. This was misfiled. When I saw the name, I thought of you. Agatha unfolded the delicate paper. The handwriting was slanted and hurried. They say I must leave. I fear they'll ruin you if I stay. Forgive me. J. Harford. Agatha felt a shiver run through her. This was written to Mrs. Wong. Mrs. Bloxby nodded gently. It appears so. He didn't leave willingly, Agatha whispered. He was driven out. Yes. Agatha looked up, eyes bright with purpose. Someone forced him to disappear, and now someone is trying to silence anyone who remembers. Mrs. Bloxby laid a gentle hand on her arm. Then take care, Agatha. Agatha nodded, though inside she felt something else, an electric certainty. She was close, too close for someone's comfort. Hodge yawned from his cushion, stretching long enough to brush against her leg. Agatha stroked him once, steadying herself. Ruin, she murmured, reading the letter again. Someone feared ruin then. Someone fears it still. Outside, dusk gathered quietly over Carsely, wrapping the village in another layer of secrecy, and Agatha Raisin, heart pounding, cigarette trembling between her fingers, knew the next steps would be dangerous, which meant she would take them anyway. The parish note lay on Agatha's kitchen table like a tiny ghost of the past, its yellowed edges whispering danger. Hodge inspected it with the suspicious caution of a cat who had seen far too much drama for one domestic life. Agatha stared at the message again, Harford's trembling words about ruin, and felt a flare of righteous fury. Harford had left because someone forced him, and the same someone, or their present-day equivalent, had killed Lorna Bent. Fog drifted over Carsely as she marched toward her car, coat clutched tight. The cold bit at her cheeks, sharpening her resolve. She was going straight to Henry Fenn. If anyone was spinning lies, it was that thin-skinned genealogist with his smug manner and his trembling hands. She reached his Evesham office just as he was unlocking the door, looking like a startled heron caught rifling through rubbish bins. He jumped when he saw her. Mrs. Raisin, you can't keep barging in. Hush, Agatha said, pushing past him. I brought something. Henry's office smelled of dust and resentment. Agatha slapped the folded note onto his desk. Henry flinched as if she'd presented a blood-stained dagger. Read it, she ordered. He picked it up, holding it gingerly, his face drained of colour. Where did you get this? Parish records, Agatha said. Filed away where you hoped no one would find it. It wasn't me who filed it, Henry said quickly. I never handled parish archives. Agatha narrowed her eyes. You recognize the handwriting? Of course I do, he said. Harford wrote with a scratchy left-leaning slant. Agatha watched him too closely for comfort. This note proves he didn't leave willingly. Henry swallowed. He was a cad, a manipulator. He tried to blackmail Mrs. Wong. Agatha almost laughed. Mrs. Wong? The woman who terrifies entire villages with her opinions. She would eat blackmailers for breakfast. Henry bristled. He was trying to extort money. I know because Lorna told me. Lorna told you, Agatha repeated slowly. Interesting. Because Lorna told everyone else she believed Harford was forced out. Those two stories don't match. Henry's fingers twitched nervously. He pushed his spectacles up his nose. Miss Bent had a tendency to exaggerate. Agatha scanned his desk. Amid the folders and family tree charts lay a half-buried scrap of paper with Lorna's handwriting. She recognized the looping capitals instantly. She plucked it up before Henry could protest. Henry, meet me at the library steps. You know why. L.B. Agatha held it up triumphantly. She arranged to meet you on the library steps, the place she died. Care to explain? Henry's face crumpled, but not convincingly. She wanted clarification on a case, that's all. Then why hide the note? Agatha asked. Why panic? He looked cornered. Because her death frightened me. And you, Mrs. Raisin, you keep turning up with accusations. Because you keep lying, she shot back. He sputtered something defensive, but Agatha had already decided he was either hiding something or too spineless to reveal it. Neither boded well. She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle his framed certificates. On her way back to Carsely, she passed Charles driving toward the green. He honked cheerfully. Agatha groaned, but stopped. Charles rolled down his window. You're scowling, Aggie, he observed. More than usual. Henry Fenn is lying, she said, and Lorna arranged to meet him right where she died. Charles looked almost impressed. That does sound suspicious. Everything he says contradicts someone else, Agatha said. He's hiding something. Get in, Charles said. You look like you need chauffeuring, and maybe a stiff drink. It's 11 in the morning, Agatha said, climbing in anyway. You've definitely had gin earlier than that, Charles said lazily. That's private, Agatha snapped. Charles grinned, easing the car through the lanes. Where are we going? To see the retired vicar, Agatha said. He knew Harford back when all this started. Charles groaned theatrically. Wonderful. An elderly clergyman. My favourite. But he drove her anyway, the wind ruffling his hair, the engine purring with aristocratic smugness. The former vicar lived in a small cottage outside Evesham, its garden full of drooping roses and stubborn weeds. He opened the door with the slow dignity of someone who had seen far too many confessions. Reverend Porter? Agatha asked. I haven't been a reverend for 14 years, he said politely. But yes. Agatha launched into her explanation. Harford's vanished file, Lorna's murder, the parish note. Reverend Porter listened with an expression somewhere between sympathy and mild bewilderment. Harford, he said finally. Yes, I recall him. Quiet fellow. Rented a room near the station. Gave the impression of a man carrying too much sorrow. Did he argue with anyone before he left? Agatha asked. Reverend Porter nodded slowly. With Mr. Hallenby, oddly enough. I saw them in the lane outside the office. Mr. Hallenby was very red in the face. Harford looked frightened. Agatha blinked. Hallenby said he didn't know anything about Harford's departure. Nonsense, Reverend Porter said. He told Harford to leave the area, said it was for the best. Agatha's irritation surged like a kettle boiling over. He lied straight to my face. Mr. Hallenby has always been rather particular about appearances, the old man said gently. He dislikes anything messy. Charles snorted. He must despise Agatha then. Agatha elbowed him sharply. Reverend Porter handed her a faded receipt. Harford left this in the church donation box the day before he disappeared. I kept it as a curiosity. It bore Harford's name, a quiet clue that he'd been preparing to stay, not flee. Agatha tucked it into her bag. Thank you, Reverend. Do be cautious, he said. Some secrets are fiercely guarded. Agatha had grown tired of everyone repeating that phrase. Charles drove her back to Carsely, enjoying the chance to comment smugly on her growing trail of enemies. She ignored him, replaying every contradiction in her head. Hallamby's lies, Henry's panic, Mrs. Wong's fear. Harford had been driven out. Lorna had discovered something, and the genealogist's involvement grew more suspicious by the hour. When Charles dropped her off, she found Roy waiting on her doorstep, bouncing impatiently. "Aggie," he cried, "I've been ringing non-stop. You never answer your phone." "Because I value my sanity," Agatha said. Roy flapped a hand. "Never mind. I have important gossip. Very important. Monumentally important." "Spit it out," she said, unlocking the door. Roy stepped inside, lowering his voice dramatically. "I popped into Bill's house, just to check on him, offer sympathy, bring pastries." "Steal pastries," Agatha corrected. "Borrow permanently," Roy said. "Anyway, I saw something in his bin, a DNA testing kit, unused." Agatha stared. "What?" "A proper kit. He bought it, then chickened out. Probably afraid of what it would confirm." Agatha felt a twist in her chest. "Oh, Bill." Roy softened a moment. "He's terrified, Aggie. Terrified of discovering he doesn't belong anywhere." Agatha sat at the kitchen table, rubbing her temples. "He's worried he's not his father's son." "Or that he is," Roy said. "Either way, he's scared." Agatha felt her irritation soften, replaced by something heavy and aching. Bill, steady, loyal Bill, carrying this terrible weight of uncertainty, and Lorna had been digging right near the truth he feared. "He needs support," Roy said, "not suspicion." Agatha nodded. "You're right." He brightened. "I usually am." She glared. "Don't press your luck." Roy flitted off, and Agatha sat with her thoughts, the house quiet except for Hodge's purring. For once, she didn't try to rush the silence. Bill's fear felt raw, human, painful, and she understood fear. Fear of loss, fear of truth, fear of being exposed. She lit a cigarette and let the truth settle slowly. Someone had driven Harford out. Someone had murdered Lorna. And every path led back to Henry Fenn. His lies, his panic, his concealed notes, his thin veneer cracking under the weight of history. Agatha flicked ash into the tray. "It's Henry," she whispered. Hodge blinked solemnly as if agreeing, and far off in the drizzle-muted quiet of Carsely, Agatha felt the mystery shift, old motives stirring beneath new lies, pulling her closer to the heart of danger. The morning light sat weakly upon Carsely, a thin grey wash that did nothing for Agatha's spirits. She paced her kitchen as the kettle rumbled, cigarette perched between her fingers, Hodge glaring at her with the withering disdain only cats could summon. The parish note, Henry's lies, Hallamby's cowardice, every thread pulled toward one conclusion, and Agatha Raisin was done pulling politely. She grabbed her coat, stubbed out her cigarette, and marched outside. The air bit at her cheeks. She welcomed the sting. It matched her irritation. Charles Fraith waited in his convertible at the curb, looking annoyingly handsome for someone who had never experienced a bad hair day. He raised an eyebrow. "You look murderous, Aggie." "Good," she said, climbing in. "I intend to interrogate someone." "Splendid," Charles replied, starting the engine. "I'll bring the charm. You bring the threats." The drive to Evesham was tense but swift. Agatha tapped her foot. Charles hummed tunelessly. When they reached Henry Fenn's office, Agatha didn't wait for courtesy. She banged on his door once and pushed inside. Henry sat at his desk, pale and thin, his spectacles fogging slightly with panic. He shot to his feet. "Mrs. Raisin, Mr. Fraith, what is the meaning of this intrusion?" "Charles," Agatha said briskly, "stand by the door. If he tries to run, trip him." Charles leaned casually against the doorframe. "With pleasure." Henry swallowed. "You cannot simply barge in without an appointment." "Watch me," Agatha replied, planting herself in the middle of the room. "We're past politeness. We're dealing with murder." Henry's hands shook. "You're jumping to absurd conclusions." "No," Agatha said, stepping closer. "I followed the clues. Every contradiction points to you. You lied about your last meeting with Lorna. You lied about Harford. You panicked over that parish note, and you conveniently failed to mention you were meant to meet Lorna on the library steps, the exact place she died." Henry's lips fluttered like loose paper. That note meant nothing." "You keep saying that," Agatha said, "but you panic faster than Doris Simpson at a slimming class. Why did you hide the note?" Henry looked desperately toward the door, but Charles gave him a cheerful little wave and blocked it further. Agatha pressed on. "Let's start with Harford. Reverend Porter saw you arguing with him before he vanished. You told me you barely knew Harford. Another lie." Henry collapsed into his chair as though gravity had betrayed him. His voice came in a whisper. "I was trying to protect the village." Agatha scoffed. "From what? A quiet man with decent handwriting?" Henry wrung his hands. "You don't understand. The scandal would have been tremendous. Mrs. Wong, she was respected. Bill was only a child. Harford was reckless, writing letters, talking to people, stirring trouble." Agatha stiffened. "What kind of trouble?" Henry's eyes darted around the room. "He said he wanted to acknowledge the child, wanted a relationship. It would have destroyed Mrs. Wong's life, her marriage, everything." Agatha's breath caught. The truth sat heavy in the air. "So you confronted him," she said quietly. Henry nodded miserably. "I was the one who did the village family records then. People trusted me. I told him I'd record accusations of impropriety if he stayed." His voice broke. "He left the next day." Agatha stared, cold fury rising. "You blackmailed an innocent man into abandoning the woman he cared for, and his own child." "It was for the best," Henry cried. "It spared Mrs. Wong humiliation. It kept Bill safe." "It kept your reputation safe," Agatha snapped. "Don't dress it up as altruism." Henry's face twisted. "I didn't mean harm, I only—" "What about Lorna?" Agatha cut in. "She discovered the truth. She contacted you. She pushed you, and you panicked again." Henry shivered. "She found the old parish note a week before she died. She confronted me about it. She said she'd tell Bill. I begged her not to. I said it would serve no purpose." Agatha felt a cold stone settle in her chest. "So you arranged to meet her at the library steps?" Henry buried his face in his hands. "I just wanted to reason with her. She wouldn't listen. She accused me of ruining lives. I lost my temper. I grabbed her arm." His voice cracked. "She stumbled. She fell. It was an accident. I swear it was an accident." Agatha's heart thudded painfully. "You pushed her." "I didn't push her," Henry insisted. "I only tried to stop her walking off. She lost her footing. That stairway is treacherous." Agatha's eyes stung with furious disbelief. "And instead of calling for help, you ran off like a coward." "I was terrified," Henry whispered. "Terrified she was dead. Terrified the past would come out. Terrified of disgrace." "Disgrace?" Agatha echoed. "A woman is dead, Henry. A man was driven away from his family because of you, and now Lorna—" Henry's voice broke entirely. "Please, please, Mrs. Raisin, I never meant—" Agatha didn't let him finish. She rifled through her handbag and pulled out Charles's ancient dictaphone. "Say it again," she said. "Everything." Henry shrank, defeated. "You're recording this?" "Of course," Agatha said. "Confessions are lovely things to have on tape." Henry repeated the entire story in a trembling, broken voice. Charles stood silent at the door, for once without humour. When Henry finished, Agatha clicked off the dictaphone. Her throat felt oddly tight, not with sympathy, but with the heavy weight of knowing Bill would hear every word. Charles straightened. "Shall I ring him?" Agatha swallowed. "Yes. He has to be the one to bring the police." Charles stepped outside to make the call, leaving Agatha in the office with Henry, who sat like a man half erased. She didn't feel victory, only exhaustion, and a terrible sadness for the lives tangled in secrets. Bill arrived 10 minutes later, still suspended from duty, but wearing a stiff determination Agatha had never seen in him. His eyes were red but dry. Henry looked up and gave a tiny, pleading whisper. "Bill, I only wanted to protect you." Bill stared at him with quiet devastation. "You ruined my father's life." Henry's face crumpled. "I saved your mother." "You destroyed any chance she had at honesty," Bill said. His voice was steady but trembling underneath. "Harford was my father, wasn't he?" Henry nodded weakly. "All the old documents suggested it, but I never told anyone." "Except the man you drove away," Bill said. Agatha moved toward him, but Bill lifted one hand gently, signaling he was all right, at least enough to continue. "I should arrest you now," he said to Henry, "but I'm suspended. Someone else will come." "Bill," Henry pleaded, "please, I am sorry." Bill didn't flinch. "Sorry doesn't bring back Harford, or Miss Bent. Sorry doesn't undo decades of lies." Charles returned, saying softly, "The officers are coming." Henry hid his face. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, I swear it." Bill gave a small, hollow laugh. "People always swear that." Agatha wanted to speak. Say something comforting, perhaps. but the words refused to form. She reached out instinctively and touched Bill's arm. He didn't pull away. 2 Mercester officers arrived and read Henry his rights. Henry stumbled as they guided him toward the door, giving Agatha one last desperate look. "You must understand," he sobbed. "I did what I thought was right." Agatha's voice was cold. "You did what was easiest. That's not the same thing." As Henry was escorted out, Hodge, who had followed Agatha from the car, arched his back and hissed loudly, tail puffed like a bottle brush. The officers jumped. Bill almost smiled. "Hodge has better judgment than most people," Agatha muttered. Bill sighed shakily. "It explains everything. Why Mother was frightened, why Lorna wanted to tell me, why everyone kept saying I should leave it alone." Agatha softened. "You deserve the truth, even if it hurts." Bill nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you for not giving up." "Giving up is not in my nature," Agatha said, much to everyone's annoyance. He managed a faint smile. "I should go to Mother. She'll be devastated." "She'll need you," Agatha said, "and you'll need her." Bill squeezed Agatha's hand once, quick, grateful, aching, then left with the officers. Agatha stood for a long moment in the quiet office, the weight of tragedy settling like dust over the papers strewn around her. Charles approached her gently. "Are you all right?" "No," Agatha said honestly, "but I will be." They stepped outside into the damp air. Henry was being led to the police car, head bowed. Mrs. Wong stood across the street, having clearly rushed from home. She looked pale, rigid, eyes locked on her son rather than the man being arrested. Agatha approached her. Mrs. Wong didn't speak until Henry's car pulled away. "You know now," she said softly. Agatha nodded. "I'm sorry." Mrs. Wong's voice trembled. "I tried to protect Bill from shame. I never imagined my silence would cost a woman her life." Agatha exhaled, the drizzle dampening her cheeks. "Silence is heavy," she said quietly, "sometimes heavier than the truth." Mrs. Wong closed her eyes. "Yes." Hodge wound himself around Agatha's ankles, demanding attention with a soft mew that broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. Agatha bent to stroke him. "I suppose we've all learned something," she murmured, "but heaven help us if it happens again." Carsely lay muted in the mist as the emotional wreckage of the past finally rose into the light. And though Agatha felt bruised and weary, she also felt steady, steadier than she had in days. Truth had come out, ugly and painful, but at last unburied. She lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward into the fog. "Onward, Hodge," she whispered. Hodge blinked, unimpressed but loyal, and together they walked back toward the village green, where secrets at last had begun to loosen their grip. Carsely responded to scandal in the only way it knew how, with a great deal of whispering, the occasional dramatic sigh, and enough speculation to power the national grid. By the next morning, the village thrummed with murmured theories as thick as the drizzle clinging to the air. Everyone had an opinion, most of them wrong, all of them confidently delivered. Agatha tried to ignore it. She failed, of course. At the post office, 3 pensioners fell silent the moment she entered, staring at her as though she were the harbinger of doom. At the village shop, Mrs. Mason practically pounced, demanding exclusive details. Agatha escaped by pretending she'd forgotten her purse, though she had it in her hand at the time. The worst offender, naturally, was Roy Silver. He had published a breathless London-friendly exclusive about the Carsely genealogy scandal on a gossip line he freelanced for. The piece was so wildly inaccurate that even Doris Simpson, who once believed fingerprints could be read by psychics, rolled her eyes. Agatha cornered Roy outside the vicarage, brandishing a printout. "Roy Silver, what on earth is this?" Roy looked pleased. "Oh, you saw it. Isn't it marvellous? We're trending in Soho." "Marvellous?" Agatha sputtered. "You've implied Bill is the secret love child of a wandering poet, that I uncovered the truth using forensic intuition, and that Henry Fenn is the mastermind behind an underground ancestry cult." Roy straightened proudly. "Dramatic flair, darling. Readers love it." "Readers will love seeing you throttled," Agatha growled. "You've made me sound like a clairvoyant with a nicotine problem." Roy blinked. "Well, you do smoke." "Not another word," Agatha snapped, "or I'll bury you in the vicarage garden. Mrs. Bloxby will help." Mrs. Bloxby, who had just emerged with a tray of donation tins, smiled serenely. "Do be kind, Agatha." Roy looked relieved enough to run. Carsely gossip faded as Agatha made her way to the Wong household. She hesitated at the gate longer than she expected. She wasn't nervous about Mrs. Wong, terrifying though the woman could be. It was Bill she feared facing. Grief, guilt, confusion. She felt responsible for stirring all of it. She knocked gently. Mrs. Wong opened the door almost instantly, as though she had been waiting. Her expression lacked its usual iron firmness. Today she looked older, softer, her shoulders bowed by the weight of truth. "Mrs. Raisin," she said quietly, "come in." The sitting room smelled faintly of ginger tea. Bill sat on the sofa, posture stiff, hands clasped together. When he looked up, Agatha saw the exhaustion behind his eyes, not the physical sort, the kind that came from having foundations shaken. "Hello, Bill," she said carefully. He gave a small nod. "Thank you for coming." Mrs. Wong gestured for Agatha to sit. "I should speak first," she said. "It's time the truth was said plainly." Bill swallowed. "Mum," she took his hands. "I never confirmed Harford's paternity because I didn't know, not for certain. Your father and I separated briefly. I was lonely. Harford was kind. But when your father returned, he was willing to try again. And I—" She faltered. "I wanted our family whole." Agatha felt a surprising ache in her chest. Mrs. Wong continued, voice steady but hurting. "I feared your father would leave if he suspected. I feared the village would tear us apart with whispers. I feared you'd grow up ashamed. So I said nothing. To Harford, to your father, to you." Bill stared at her for a long moment. His voice, when it came, was gentle. "I'm not ashamed of you. I'm ashamed I doubted you." Mrs. Wong closed her eyes tightly. "You had every right. I failed you." "No," Bill said, squeezing her hands. "You protected me. I see that now. I just wish you hadn't been alone in it." Agatha found herself blinking back something suspiciously sentimental. She cleared her throat loudly. "Right. Well, emotions acknowledged. Now we move forward." Mrs. Wong gave her a grateful, wavering smile. Bill let out a breath that sounded like the first he'd taken in days. Charles arrived just in time to ruin the moment. "Good heavens," he said lightly, leaning into the doorway. "Is everyone crying? I didn't bring handkerchiefs." "Charles," Agatha snapped, "must you?" "Always," he replied cheerfully, taking a seat. "You're almost human today. It's unnerving." Agatha picked up a cushion and threw it at him. He caught it mid-air with smug finesse. Bill actually laughed. It was small, but real. Later outside, Charles nudged Agatha's shoulder. "You handled that well. You didn't yell once." "I'm capable of compassion," Agatha said defensively. "Occasionally," Charles replied, "usually when nobody's looking." She swatted him weakly. News spread quickly when the police formally charged Henry Fenn with manslaughter. Carsely reacted with a complicated mixture of vindication and unease. Some people murmured that justice had been done. Others lamented that such a quiet, fussy man could be capable of killing. Doris insisted he must have been possessed at the time. Agatha ignored it all. She felt no triumph, only the dull ache of seeing a village tragedy laid bare, decades of secrets unraveling into heartbreak. What lingered most was Bill's expression when Henry confessed. Not anger, not hate. Something heavier, relief and sorrow woven together. Agatha had been so afraid he'd reject the truth. But Bill wasn't angry about being Harford's son. He was angry about never being allowed to know. She understood that more deeply than she expected. By evening, fatigue crept over her like a damp shawl. She returned to her cottage, where warm lights glowed softly through the windows. Hodge sat smack in the middle of her favourite armchair, tail curled royally around his paws. "You've claimed it now, have you?" Agatha muttered. Hodge blinked as if to say he'd claimed the entire cottage, actually. There was a knock at the door. Bill stood on the step, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course," Agatha said, stepping aside. "Sit down. Not on Hodge. He'll murder you." Bill perched on the sofa. He looked uncertain, fragile in a way unfamiliar for him. Agatha poured 2 gins, one strong, one irresponsible, and handed him the stronger one. He sipped it gratefully. "I feel like my entire life's been rewritten." Agatha sat opposite him. "You're still Bill, same stubborn, decent nuisance you were yesterday." He gave a small laugh. "I'm terrified, Agatha." "Of what?" "Of who I am now." He stared into his glass. "Am I still my father's son? Do I belong anywhere? Or am I some leftover shame everyone tried to hide? Agatha leaned forward. Listen to me carefully. You are Bill Wong. You always have been, you always will be. You belong where you choose to belong, not where people place you. Bill met her eyes. You sound almost wise. She snorted. Don't spread it around. Ruins my reputation. They sat in quiet for a while. Hodge hopped onto the back of the sofa and regarded Bill as if deciding whether he approved of this emotional display. He eventually settled, curling his tail around Agatha's shoulder like a possessive scarf. Bill smiled faintly. He's protective of you. He's protective of the furniture, Agatha said. You're sitting where he wanted to sit. Bill looked at his gin again. Do you think Mum will forgive herself? In time, Agatha said. She did what she thought was right. It was wrong, but it came from love. That's a complicated burden. And Henry? Bill asked quietly. Agatha exhaled. He'll face what he deserves. Whether he intended harm or not, his lies cost a woman her life and destroyed another man's future. But guilt will punish him long before prison does. Bill nodded slowly. Thank you for everything. You kept pushing even when I didn't want you to. You're welcome, Agatha said, though the words felt oddly tender coming out. Bill looked around the room, warm in lamplight. Hodge stretched luxuriously, claiming yet more territory. Agatha, Bill said suddenly, voice soft but steady, will you stay in my life even if it gets messy? Agatha blinked. She hadn't expected that. Her heart gave an inconvenient lurch. She recovered with a dry smile. Bill, it already is messy. He laughed. Properly this time, a sound lifting the heaviness around them. They talked a bit longer, softly, gently, until the clock marked the late hour. Bill stood to leave. At the door he paused. You were right, you know, he said, about the truth being better than silence. Don't tell anyone, Agatha replied. I'll deny it under oath. He left with a grateful nod. Agatha closed the door and leaned against it, letting the quiet settle over her. Hodge brushed her ankle, purring with the calm certainty of a creature who knew his human needed comforting. She scooped him up, holding him close. We did all right, didn't we? Hodge blinked with regal indifference, paw resting on her shoulder like a blessing. Agatha lit a cigarette, letting the smoke drift lazily as she moved to the armchair Hodge had vacated. The room glowed in soft amber. Outside, the drizzle pattered lightly, the world finally easing into peace. She took a slow breath. Carsely would gossip, Roy would exaggerate, Charles would tease, Mrs. Bloxby would offer gentle wisdom, Bill would heal, slowly, painfully. And Agatha? She would face whatever came next, with cigarettes, sarcasm, and the inconveniently soft heart she pretended not to have. Hodge curled on her lap, warm and steadfast. Messy indeed, she murmured. But tonight, for once, she felt something close to calm. And in Carsely, that was victory enough. Carsely eased itself back into normality with the slow, creaking reluctance of an elderly cat deciding whether to move from a sun-warmed windowsill. The village had survived scandal before, an epidemic of stolen marrows, a disastrous harvest fate. That time Roy Silver tried rebranding the WI, but murder always caused a deeper shiver. Even so, routine returned. The drizzle reappeared, the hedgerows dripped gently, and gossip settled into comfortable repetition. Agatha woke to a hush outside her cottage, the soft drip of rain off the thatch, and Hodge kneading her stomach with the solemn determination of a creature convinced breakfast might appear if he pressed hard enough. She grumbled, rolled out of bed, and lit her first cigarette of the day. The smoke curled comfortingly. She felt almost peaceful, though she'd never admit it aloud. By mid-morning, Mrs. Bloxby appeared at her door carrying a basket of fresh scones. Agatha opened the door with theatrical surprise. "What a lovely coincidence," she said. "I was just thinking the day needed improvement." Mrs. Bloxby smiled, stepping inside. "You've been through a great deal, Agatha. I thought a visit might help." Agatha snorted. "I wasn't the one with a family secret collapsed around me." "Perhaps not," Mrs. Bloxby replied, placing the scones on the table. "But you cared deeply. That leaves its own mark." Agatha pretended not to hear that. She poured tea, muttering about draughts and damp weather. Mrs. Bloxby watched her with calm affection. "Truth rarely destroys, you know," she said gently. "It rearranges, but people are sturdier than we fear." Agatha bristled automatically. "I'm not afraid." "Of course not," Mrs. Blocksby said smoothly. "But some of us are." Agatha opened her mouth to retort, then shut it again. She picked up a scone instead. "Well, rearranged or not, Bill seems steadier today." "He will find his footing," Mrs. Blocksby said, "especially with friends who care." Agatha dropped crumbs on her blouse. "Honestly, everyone's so sentimental. It's exhausting." Mrs. Blocksby only smiled and patted her arm before taking her leave. Bill returned to duty 2 days later. Agatha stood near the Mercester station entrance, pretending she had simply been passing by. Charles lounged against his convertible nearby, watching her with maddening amusement. Bill exited the station wearing his uniform again, posture straight but not rigid. When he spotted Agatha, he walked over with a shy, uncertain smile. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. I know I wasn't easy." Agatha waved a hand. "Oh, you were fine, apart from the moping and running away, and—" Bill laughed. "You kept me steady, more than you know." This unexpected sincerity made Agatha's stomach flip. She coughed to cover it. "Well, someone had to make sure you didn't fall into a ditch." Charles let out a low chuckle. Agatha Raisin, the beating heart of compassion. She shot him a glare, but Bill seemed relaxed, and that mattered more than Charles's commentary. "You'll be all right now?" she asked, softer than intended. Bill nodded. "I'm starting to be." He headed inside. Agatha watched him go, feeling a quiet warmth she quickly disguised as cigarette smoke. Charles stretched lazily. That was rather touching. "Shut up, Charles." "As you wish," he said, entirely too pleased. When Agatha returned home that afternoon, a thick envelope awaited on the hall table. She recognized Hallenby's shaky, looping script instantly. Her pulse fluttered. She tore it open. Inside lay a single letter, clearly prepared some time before his office was ransacked. Agatha read slowly. Harford had died abroad, decades ago, after a brief illness. No scandal, no reinvention, no great revelation waiting to be unearthed. He had simply built a quiet life far from the Cotswolds, leaving no further entanglements behind. There was even a line saying he wished no distress on the woman he once cared for. Agatha held the paper a long moment. She imagined Bill hearing this now. Another weight, another truth, another round of pain. No, he didn't need it. Not yet. She folded the letter neatly and placed it in her desk drawer. Some truths helped. Some only reopened wounds. Evening draped itself over Carsely like a soft shawl, carrying the faint scent of damp grass and chimney smoke. Agatha stepped outside with a cigarette, watching the last of the daylight melt into lavender dusk. Hodge slipped around her ankles with proprietary grace, stretching before settling at her feet. She exhaled smoke into the cool air, thinking of Mrs. Wong's trembling confession, Bill's haunted relief, Henry Fenn's desperate lies, and Lorna's tragic determination. The whole village had been twisted by pride and fear, yet somehow it was knitting itself together again. Humans, Agatha reflected, were both fragile and infuriatingly strong. She felt that inconvenient tenderness again, the one she insisted did not exist. Friendship, loyalty, love in its muddled forms, all of it far more bothersome than crime-solving. She sighed. "Honestly, Raisin, you're turning sentimental. Must be the weather." Hodge blinked up at her, unimpressed. She reached down and scratched behind his ears. "You're the only creature in this village who doesn't judge me. Well, except when I'm late with dinner." Hodge yawned pointedly. Agatha took one last drag and stubbed out the cigarette. Peace settled lightly around her like a worn quilt. Naturally, it didn't last. The phone rang inside the cottage, sharply, insistently, with the unmistakable energy of someone who had absolutely no respect for tranquility. Agatha groaned and marched to answer it. "What?" she snapped. "Agatha, darling!" Roy's voice shrieked down the line. "You won't believe the scandal I've uncovered." Agatha hung up on him. The phone rang again immediately. She sighed, picked it up and said, "This had better involve no funerals, no genealogists, and absolutely no Marrows." "Better," Roy gasped. "It involves a séance, an inheritance, and a disappearing fiancé." Agatha closed her eyes. Peace had been nice while it lasted. She hung up, grabbed her coat and muttered, "Oh, for heaven's sake." Hodge watched her from the doorway, tail flicking in regal boredom, as Agatha stomped down the path toward whatever fresh nonsense awaited. Order restored, not in Carsely. But life, Agatha thought, wouldn't be half as interesting otherwise.